The yellow school bus rumbled down the highway, filled with the excited chatter of 8th graders from Pinewood Middle School. 14-year-old Jake Winters stared out the window, his reflection ghosting against the passing landscape of trees and buildings. Unlike his classmates, who bounced in their seats and tossed paper airplanes, Jake sat quietly, feeling that familiar knot in his stomach. "Hey, daydreamer," said Lily Chen, plopping down beside him. "You look like you're a million miles away." Jake shrugged and forced a smile. "Just thinking about stuff." The truth was, Jake had been feeling strange all morning. It was like an itch inside his head that he couldn't scratch, something he'd experienced a few times before but never understood. His mom called it his worry bug and told him it was just anxiety. His dad said he had an overactive imagination, but Jake knew it was something else, something he couldn't explain. "We're almost at the airport," announced Ms. Rivera, their science teacher, standing at the front of the bus. "Remember, this is a working airport, not a playground. Stay with your assigned groups and don't touch anything without permission." The Westfield Regional Airport wasn't exactly impressive, just a small passenger terminal, a couple of hangars and a runway for private planes and the occasional commercial flight. But for the students' careers in transportation field trip, it was perfect. As the bus pulled into the visitor parking area, Jake's uneasiness grew stronger. His palms began to sweat, and the knot in his stomach tightened. "You okay?" Lily asked, noticing his pale face. "You look like you might throw up." "I'm fine," Jake mumbled, wiping his hands on his jeans as they filed off the bus. Ms. Rivera divided them into groups of 6, each assigned to a different airport employee who would show them around. Jake ended up with Lily, his best friend Tyler, Wong, and 3 other classmates he didn't know well. Their guide was a gray-haired man named Bob who worked in air traffic control. "The tower's the best part," Bob was saying as he led them through the main terminal. "You can see everything from up there. Planes taking off, landing, taxiing, it's like watching a dance." Jake tried to focus on Bob's words, but the strange feeling was getting worse. His head throbbed with pressure, like it might split open. As they passed the small VIP lounge, Jake suddenly stopped walking. Through the glass walls, he saw a man in an expensive suit talking on a phone, surrounded by people in dark clothing who looked important. A sleek black car waited on the tarmac outside, and beyond it sat a gleaming white private jet with the words, "Reed Innovations," painted on the side. "That's Alexander Reed," whispered Tyler, noticing Jake's stare. "The tech guy. My dad says he's worth billions." Jake had heard of Reed. Everyone had. Everyone. The man had invented some kind of revolutionary computer chip and built a tech empire. He appeared on magazine covers and TV shows, talking about changing the world through technology. But Jake wasn't interested in Reed's fame or money. Something else had caught his attention, something only he could see. As Reed gathered his things and prepared to leave the lounge, Jake saw a flash of images in his mind. Hands working in darkness, unscrewing panels inside a plane, cutting wires, replacing parts. Then fire, an explosion in midair, twisted metal falling from the sky. The vision was so vivid that Jake gasped aloud, drawing concerned looks from his classmates. "Jake?" Lily's voice sounded far away. "What's wrong?" Jake couldn't answer. His eyes were fixed on Reed, who was now walking toward the exit that led to the tarmac. Without thinking, Jake broke away from his group and ran toward the VIP area. "Hey, kid," Bob called after him. "You can't go in there." Jake ignored him, pushing past a security guard who reached for his arm. His heart pounded in his ears as he burst through the door just as Reed was about to step outside. "Stop!" Jake shouted, his voice cracking. "Your plane was sabotaged. Don't fly." The entire room froze. Reed turned slowly, his eyebrows raised in surprise. His security team immediately moved between him and Jake, one man grabbing Jake roughly by the shoulders. "What did you say?" Reed asked, peering around his bodyguard. Jake struggled against the man's grip. "Someone messed with your plane, I saw it. If you fly today, you'll crash." By now, airport security had arrived, and Ms. Rivera was hurrying over, her face flushed with embarrassment. "I am so sorry, Mr. Reed," she said breathlessly. "I don't know what's gotten into him." The boy seems quite upset, Reed said, studying Jake with curious eyes. Perhaps we should— Sir, we need to keep to the schedule, interrupted a woman holding a tablet. Tokyo won't wait. Reed hesitated, glancing from Jake to his plane outside. Yes, of course, he finally said. Security has checked everything thoroughly, I'm sure. As Reed turned to leave, Jake called out once more. Please, check the left. Engine, and the fuel line. Someone cut the wires. But Reed was already walking away, though Jake noticed his steps were slower, his shoulders tense. The security guard released Jake into Ms. Rivera's custody, and the teacher led him firmly back to the group, where his classmates stared with wide eyes and open mouths. What were you thinking? Ms. Rivera hissed. Do you have any idea how serious this is? Breaking security protocols, harassing a private citizen. I wasn't harassing him, Jake protested. I was trying to save him. That's enough, Jake, Ms. Rivera snapped. Wait on the bus. I'm calling your parents. As Jake trudged back to the bus under the escort of a security officer, he watched Reed's plane through the terminal windows. The Millionaire was boarding now, casting one last glance toward the terminal before disappearing inside the aircraft. Jake slumped in his seat, tears of frustration burning his eyes. Why wouldn't anyone listen? How could he explain something he didn't understand himself? The rest of the field trip went on without him. Jake sat alone on the bus, ignoring the occasional curious face that appeared in the window. After what felt like hours, Ms. Rivera returned with his classmates. Your mom's coming to pick you up, she told him coldly. The principal wants to see you first thing tomorrow morning. The ride back to school was torture. Some kids whispered and pointed. Others laughed outright. Lily tried to catch his eye sympathetically, but Jake kept his gaze fixed on his shoes. When his mom's old blue sedan pulled up outside the school office, Jake could tell from her face that she'd heard everything. Get in, she said quietly when he approached. She waited until they were driving home before speaking again. Want to tell me what happened? You won't believe me, Jake muttered. His mom sighed. Try me. So Jake told her about the strange feeling he'd had all morning, the vision of someone tampering with the plane, the certainty that Alexander Reed was in danger. Jake, his mom said gently when he finished, honey, you can't just make accusations like that, especially not about someone like Alexander Reed. Do you know how much trouble you could be in? I didn't make it up, Jake insisted. I saw it. Just like I saw Mr. Peterson fall off his ladder before it happened, remember? Or when I knew Grandpa was going to have a heart attack before the doctors did. His mom's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. Those incidents had become family stories that nobody talked about anymore. Coincidences, they called them, or lucky guesses. This isn't like that, she said firmly. This is serious. You disrupted an airport. You accosted a famous person. Your principal might suspend you. When they got home, Jake's dad was already there, pacing the living room. His face darkened when Jake walked in. What were you thinking, son? He demanded. Jake didn't answer. What was the point? They'd never understand. Go to your room, his dad finally said. No phone, no computer. We'll discuss this more after dinner. In his room, Jake sat on the edge of his bed and stared out the window at the darkening sky. Somewhere up there, Alexander Reed's plane might be flying, carrying him toward disaster. Or maybe Reed had listened, just a little bit, and had someone check the plane again. Maybe Jake's warning would save him, or maybe Jake was just a weird kid with an overactive imagination like everyone said. He picked up the model airplane from his desk, a gift from his uncle last Christmas. As he turned it over in his hands, he couldn't shake the images from his vision. The cut wires, the tampered engine, the explosion. Jake set the plane down and lay back on his bed, arms crossed behind his head. Whatever happened now was out of his hands. But deep down he knew what he'd seen was real, and he knew that tomorrow, one way or another, everyone else would know it too. Jake barely slept that night. He tossed and turned, his mind replaying the scene at the airport. The security guards grabbing him, Ms. Rivera's angry face, his classmates staring like he'd grown a second head. Worst of all, he kept seeing Alexander Reed walking onto his plane ignoring Jake's warning. When his alarm went off at 6:30 a.m., Jake was already awake, staring at the ceiling. The house was quiet as he shuffled to the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face. In the mirror, dark circles shadowed his eyes, making him look older than 14. Downstairs, his mom stood at the kitchen counter, stirring a cup of coffee. She looked up when Jake entered but didn't smile. "Morning," he mumbled, sliding onto a stool. "There's cereal in the pantry," she replied, her voice lacking its usual warmth. Dad already left for work. Jake wasn't hungry, but he poured himself a bowl anyway, pushing the flakes around with his spoon. The silence between them stretched uncomfortably. "Your meeting with Principal Harlow is at 8:15, his mom finally said. "I called in late to work so I could take you." Jake nodded, his stomach tightening. Principal Harlow was known for his strict discipline. Getting called to his office was serious business. His mom switched on the small TV that sat on the kitchen counter, a morning habit she never broke. The local news was just starting, the anchor's voice filling the kitchen with talk of weather and traffic. "And in business news," the anchor continued, "tech billionaire Alexander Reed has postponed his trip to Tokyo following what his company is calling routine maintenance issues with his private aircraft." Jake's head snapped up, his spoon clattering against the bowl. On screen, a photo of Alexander Reed appeared next to footage of his white private jet. Reed was scheduled to unveil a new semiconductor technology at the Global Tech Summit, the anchor explained. But according to a statement from Reed Innovations, the CEO's flight was delayed after technicians discovered a mechanical issue during pre-flight checks. The company has not specified the nature of the problem, but assures shareholders that Reed will attend the summit virtually until travel arrangements can be made. Jake's mom slowly turned from the TV to stare at her son, her coffee cup frozen, halfway to her lips. "Jake," she whispered. "They found it," Jake said, his voice barely audible. "They actually found it." The phone rang, startling them both. His mom answered it, her eyes never leaving Jake's face. "Yes, he's right here," she said into the receiver. "Who's calling, please?" Her eyebrows shot up. "I see. Just a moment." She held out the phone to Jake, her hand trembling slightly. "It's Ms. Rivera." Jake took the phone, bracing himself for more trouble. "Hello? Jake, it's Ms. Rivera. Have you seen the news this morning?" "Yeah," he replied cautiously. "About Mr. Reed's plane." There was a pause on the other end. "The school just got a call from Reed Innovations. Apparently, during their inspection, they found," she lowered her voice, "they found evidence of tampering with the aircraft. Cut wires in the left engine. Exactly where you said." Jake's legs felt suddenly weak. He sank back onto the stool. "They want to know how you knew," Ms. Rivera continued. "The police might have questions too. This is serious, Jake." "I didn't do anything wrong," he said quickly. "I know that now." Ms. Rivera's voice softened. "But Jake, how did you know? You couldn't have seen anything from where we were standing." Jake gripped the phone tighter. "I just saw it. In my head." Another long pause. "Well, whatever happened, I owe you an apology. We all do. Your meeting with Principal Harlow has been canceled. Instead, there will be some people from Reed Innovations coming to talk to you." She hesitated. "And Jake, maybe don't talk to any reporters if they call. Your parents might want to get advice first." After hanging up, Jake told his mom everything Ms. Rivera had said. She sat down heavily at the kitchen table, her face pale. "This is unbelievable," she murmured. "Absolutely unbelievable." Jake's phone buzzed with an incoming text, then another, and another. "What's happening?" his mom asked. Jake checked his phone and found dozens of messages from classmates. The first was from Lily. "OMG, Jake. You're all over social media. Someone posted about what happened at the airport yesterday, and now the news is reporting Reed's plane really was sabotaged. How did, you know?" Similar messages poured in from other classmates, some from kids who had barely spoken to him before. Jake turned off his phone and set it on the table. "I think I should stay home today," he said quietly. His mom nodded, still looking stunned. "I think that's a good idea." By mid-morning, Their quiet house had become the center of unwanted attention. A local news van parked across the street, and a reporter knocked on their door twice before Jake's mom told them firmly to leave. The phone rang constantly until they stopped answering. Jake's dad came home early from work, his face grim as he navigated past the reporter who tried to ask him questions from the sidewalk. "This is insane," he muttered as he closed the front door behind him. "My boss called me into his office because people are saying my son is some kind of psychic who saved Alexander Reed's life." He looked at Jake, who sat on the living room couch, knees pulled up to his chest. "Son, we need to talk about what's happening." Jake nodded miserably. "I know it sounds crazy." "It doesn't matter how it sounds," his dad interrupted, sitting beside him. "What matters is that somehow you knew something no one else did, and now a lot of powerful people are interested in you. We need to be careful." The doorbell rang again. Jake's dad stood up with an irritated sigh. "If it's another reporter," but when he opened the door, it wasn't a reporter. Two police officers stood on the porch, their faces serious. "Mr. Winters?" "I'm Officer Diaz, and this is Officer Chen. We'd like to speak with your son about the incident at Westfield Airport yesterday." Jake's mom appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands nervously on a dish towel. "Is that really necessary? He's just a child." "It's standard procedure, ma'am," Officer Chen explained. "We're investigating an attempted sabotage of a private aircraft. Your son may have information relevant to our case." "He doesn't know anything," Jake's dad protested. "He wasn't even near that plane." "Then we'd like to understand how he knew about the tampering," Officer Diaz said firmly. "It won't take long, and you're welcome to be present during the conversation." Jake's parents exchanged a worried glance before reluctantly inviting the officers in. In the living room, Jake sat between his parents on the couch while the officers took chairs across from them. Officer Chen had a small notebook open on her knee. "Jake," Officer Diaz began, "can you tell us exactly what happened yesterday at the airport?" Jake recounted the field trip, the strange feeling he'd had all morning, seeing Alexander Reed, and then the vision of someone tampering with the plane. "And you've never met Mr. Reed before?" Officer Chen asked, taking notes. "No, never," Jake replied. "Do you have any connection to Reed Innovations or its competitors?" Jake shook his head. "Have you ever been inside a private jet like Mr. Reed's?" "No." "Then how did you know specifically about the left engine and the fuel line?" Officer Diaz leaned forward, his eyes intense. Jake looked down at his hands. "I told you. I saw it in my head, like a movie playing." The officers exchanged skeptical glances. "Jake," Officer Chen said gently, "you understand that what you're describing isn't typical. It's difficult for us to accept that you simply saw this happening without any prior knowledge." "You think I did it," Jake realized, his voice rising. "You think I sabotaged the plane?" "We're not saying that," Officer Diaz said quickly. "But we need to explore all possibilities." Jake's dad stood up, his face flushed with anger. "This is ridiculous. He's 14 years old. How would he even get access to a private jet, let alone know how to sabotage it?" "Mr. Winters, please," Officer Chen began. "No, I think we're done here," Jake's dad cut her off. "If you have actual evidence that my son was involved, show it. Otherwise, I think you should leave. And if you want to talk to Jake again, you'll need to do it with our lawyer present." The officers left reluctantly, warning that they might return with more questions. As the door closed behind them, Jake felt a wave of exhaustion wash over him. "They think I'm lying," he said quietly. "Or worse." His mom sat beside him, putting an arm around his shoulders. "They're just doing their job, honey. They have to consider all possibilities." "But I didn't do anything wrong," Jake insisted. "I was trying to help." "We know that," his dad said, his anger fading to concern. "But this situation is complicated. People don't understand what happened, neither do we, honestly." Jake leaned against his mom, suddenly feeling very young and very tired. "What happens now?" His dad ran a hand through his hair, looking out the window at the news van still parked across the street. "I don't know, son, but whatever comes next, we'll face it together." None of them noticed the sleek black car that pulled up behind the news van, or the man in the expensive suit who stepped out and studied their house with interested eyes before making a phone call. The rest of the day crawled by in a blur of ringing phones and peeking through curtains at the reporters who occasionally approached their door. By evening, Jake felt like a prisoner in his own home. His parents spoke in hushed tones in the kitchen, stopping whenever he came near. The news channels kept showing the same footage of Alexander Reed's plane sitting on the tarmac, surrounded by police and what looked like FBI agents in dark suits. Jake's dad ordered pizza for dinner, since none of them felt like cooking. They ate in the living room with the TV turned off, the silence broken only by the occasional buzz of their phones as more messages came in from curious friends and relatives. "I think you should stay home again tomorrow," his mom said, picking at her slice. "Give things a chance to calm down." Jake nodded, though he doubted things would calm down anytime soon. How could they when he couldn't even explain what had happened? His dad's phone rang. He checked the caller ID and frowned before answering. "Hello?" "Yes, this is David Winters." He listened for a moment, his eyebrows rising. "I see. And who did? You say you work for again?" Another pause. "Yes, he's here, but I'm not sure that's appropriate right now. We've had reporters hounding us all day." Jake and his mom exchanged curious glances. "Credentials?" his dad was saying. "Can you prove that?" He listened again, then covered the phone with his hand. "It's someone from Reed Innovations. He says Alexander Reed wants to meet Jake tomorrow." Jake's mom's eyes widened. "The Alexander Reed? Why would he want to meet Jake?" His dad returned to the call. "I understand, but you have to see this from our perspective. My son is 14. After everything that's happened today, yes, email would be fine. We'll review it and call you back." He hung up, looking troubled. "What did they say?" Jake asked. "They want you to meet with Reed at his downtown office tomorrow afternoon. The man I spoke to," he called himself Mr. Daniels, "says Reed is grateful for what you did and wants to thank you personally." His dad ran a hand through his hair. "He's sending over some kind of verification that he's legitimate and not just a reporter trying to get a story." "Should we go?" Jake's mom asked. "I don't know," his dad admitted. "It feels strange." Jake thought about Alexander Reed, the man whose life he might have saved. What would he want to talk about? Would he ask the same questions as the police, trying to figure out how Jake had known about the sabotage? "I think we should go," Jake said suddenly. "Maybe he knows something. Maybe he can help explain what happened to me." His parents looked uncertain, but before they could respond, his dad's email notification chimed. He checked his phone. "It's from Reed Innovations," he said, scrolling through the message. "There's a letter signed by Reed himself, contact information for verification and, they've attached Mr. Daniel's security clearance and company ID." "Seems pretty official," his mom said, peering over his shoulder. "Yeah," his dad agreed, still scrolling. "And they're offering to send a car for us." "A car?" Jake's mom repeated. "They say it's for security reasons, to avoid the press." They debated the offer for nearly an hour, calling the phone numbers provided to verify they really were speaking to Reed Innovations employees. Finally, after making sure the meeting would be at Reed's official downtown office building with both of them accompanying Jake, his parents agreed. "The car will be here at 2 p.m. tomorrow," his dad announced after making the final call. "We'll meet with Reed for no more than 1 hour, and then they'll bring us straight home." That night, Jake lay in bed staring at his ceiling fan, watching. It turned lazy circles in the darkness. What did Alexander Reed want from him? Was he in trouble, or was Reed truly just grateful? He fell asleep still wondering, his dreams filled with planes falling from the sky and men in suits chasing him through endless airport terminals. The next day passed with excruciating slowness. Jake tried watching TV, but every channel seemed to be talking about the mysterious boy who had warned Reed about his plane. He tried reading, but couldn't focus. By noon, he was pacing his room, checking the time every few minutes. At 1:30, he changed into his nicest clothes, dark jeans and a button-up shirt his grandma had given him for Christmas, He combed his hair neatly and even dabbed on a tiny bit of his dad's aftershave, which made him sneeze. "Nervous?" his mom asked when he came downstairs. "A little," Jake admitted. That was an understatement. His stomach felt like it was hosting a gymnastics competition. His dad adjusted his tie in the hall mirror. "Remember, we can leave any time. If anything feels wrong or uncomfortable, just say the word." At exactly 2 p.m., a sleek black car with tinted windows pulled up in front of their house. Jake watched through the living room curtains as a tall man in a dark suit stepped out and approached their door. The doorbell rang, and his dad answered. The man outside introduced himself as Mr. Daniels, head of security for Alexander Reed. "It's a pleasure to meet you in person, Mr. Winters," he said, his voice deep but friendly. He turned to Jake with a slight nod. "And you must be Jake. Mr. Reed is looking forward to meeting you." Mr. Daniels led them to the car, opening the back door for them. Inside, the seats were soft black leather, and a small refrigerator held bottles of water and soda.
"Feel free to help yourselves," Mr. Daniels said, sliding into the front passenger seat. "The drive downtown should take about 20 minutes. As they pulled away from the curb, Jake noticed 2 reporters scrambling for their cameras. He sank
lower in his seat. "Those tinted windows work both ways," Mr. Daniels assured him, noticing his discomfort. "They can't see you." The drive was quiet, with Jake's parents occasionally asking Mr. Daniels polite questions about his work. Jake stared out the window, watching familiar neighborhoods give way to the taller buildings of downtown. Finally, the car pulled into an underground parking garage beneath a gleaming skyscraper with Reed Innovations displayed in sleek metal letters across its front. "We'll take the private elevator," Mr. Daniels explained, as he led them through a secure door that required both a key card and a fingerprint scan. The elevator was mirrored on all sides, making it seem much larger than it was. As they ascended, Jake caught his own nervous reflection, a skinny boy with anxious eyes flanked by his equally tense parents. "Mr. Reed's office is on the top floor," Mr. Daniels informed them. "He's cleared his schedule for this meeting." The elevator doors opened directly into a spacious reception area decorated in shades of blue and gray. A woman sat behind a curved desk, typing on a computer with 3 large monitors. She looked up as they entered. "Good afternoon, Mr. Daniels," she said with a professional smile. "Mr. Reed is expecting them." Mr. Daniels nodded and led them past the reception desk, down a short hallway lined with abstract artwork, and stopped before a set of double doors. He knocked once, then opened the doors. "Mr. Reed," he announced, "the Winters family is here." The office beyond was enormous, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering a breathtaking view of the city. In the center of the room was a large desk of polished wood, and behind it stood Alexander Reed himself. In person, Reed looked different from his TV appearances. He was taller than Jake expected, with streaks of gray at his temples that didn't show in photographs. He wore a simple navy suit with no tie, and his expression was serious but not unfriendly. "Mr. and Mrs. Winters," Reed said, stepping around, his desk to shake their hands. "Thank you for coming." He turned to Jake, his eyes curious. "And Jake, I've been very eager to meet you." Jake swallowed hard. "Nice to meet you too, sir." Reed gestured toward a seating area near the windows where comfortable-looking leather chairs were arranged around a low table. "Please sit down," he said. "Can I offer you anything? Coffee? Tea? Something cold?" Jake's parents politely declined, but Jake asked for water, his throat suddenly dry. Reed nodded to Mr. Daniels, who left the room briefly and returned with a glass of ice water. As Jake took a sip, Reed sat across from them, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. "I imagine you're wondering why I wanted to meet you," he said directly. Jake's dad nodded. "It's been an unusual couple of days." "Indeed it has," Reed agreed. He turned his attention to Jake. "You saved my life. I want to understand how." Jake glanced at his parents, who nodded encouragingly. "I don't really understand it myself," he began hesitantly. "I just saw it happening. Like a movie in my head." "You had a vision," Reed suggested. Jake nodded, relieved that Reed didn't seem skeptical. Yes. I saw someone opening panels in your plane, cutting wires, messing with the engine. Could you see who it was? Reed asked. Jake shook his head. No. Just hands working in the dark. Reed leaned back, studying Jake thoughtfully. And this has happened before? These visions? Jake hesitated, then nodded again. A few times. Nothing this big, though. Reed turned to Jake's parents. Your son has an extraordinary gift. We're not sure what it is, Jake's mom said cautiously. We've never really talked about it before. I understand, Reed said. It's not the kind of thing that's easy to discuss. He paused, seeming to consider his next words carefully. The reason I asked you here today is not just to thank Jake, though I am profoundly grateful. I wanted to tell you something that might help you make sense of what's happening. He stood and walked to his desk, opening a drawer. He returned with what looked like an old photograph, which he handed to Jake. In the faded image, a younger man stood beside what appeared to be an old factory building. He had Reed's eyes and the same angular jaw. That's my father, Reed explained. Harold Reed. 30 years ago, he saved 47 people by evacuating a factory minutes before a gas line exploded. No one could understand how he knew it would happen. There was no visible leak, no warning signs. He just knew. Jake looked up from the photograph, his heart racing. He had visions too? Reed nodded solemnly. Yes. And so did his father before him. It seems to run in certain family lines, though it often skips generations. It's rare, but not as unique as you might think. Jake's parents exchanged stunned glances. Are you saying? Jake's dad began. I'm saying your son isn't alone, Reed replied, and I might be able to help him understand what he's experiencing, if you'll let me. A heavy silence filled the spacious office as Jake and his parents tried to process Reed's words. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, clouds drifted past, casting moving shadows across the polished floor. You're saying there are others like me? Jake finally asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Reed nodded, taking the old photograph back and looking at it fondly before setting it on the coffee table between them. Not many, but yes. People who can sense danger before it happens. My foundation has been researching this phenomenon for nearly a decade. Your foundity. On? Jake's dad leaned forward, his expression a mix of curiosity and caution. What kind of research exactly? Reed smiled slightly. Nothing sinister, I assure you. The Reed Foundation for Cognitive Research studies exceptional mental abilities. We work with universities, medical centers, even government agencies occasionally. All above board, all ethical. Jake's mom reached over and took Jake's hand. And what does this have to do with Jake? He's just a boy who had some kind of premonition. A premonition that saved my life, Reed reminded her gently. Mrs. Winters, what your son experienced isn't random or meaningless. It's a rare cognitive ability that appears to be linked to specific brain activities. He turned to Jake. Have you noticed patterns in when these visions occur? Jake thought for a moment, remembering the handful of times he'd experienced something similar. They always involve someone getting hurt, or something bad happening. Exactly, Reed said, nodding as if Jake had confirmed something important. The ability seems to trigger specifically in response to impending danger, particularly life-threatening situations. It's like an early warning system. But why me? Jake asked. You said it runs in families, but nobody else in my family has this, whatever it is. Reed glanced at Jake's parents. Are you certain about that? Sometimes these abilities manifest subtly. A grandparent with lucky hunches. A cousin who's good at avoiding accidents? Jake's mom frowned thoughtfully. My grandmother used to say she could feel storms coming in her bones, long before the weather forecast. And my Uncle Bill always seemed to know when fishing boats were in trouble, even before the distress calls came in. We just called it good instincts. Possibly more than that, Reed suggested. The gift often presents differently across generations. Mr. Daniels, who had been standing quietly by the door, approached Reed and whispered something in his ear. Reed nodded. Jake, while we continue our conversation, Mr. Daniels has something he'd like to show your parents. Some information about our foundation that might help them understand what we do. Would that be all right? Jake looked to his parents questioningly. His dad seemed hesitant. We'd prefer to stay with Jake, he said firmly. Of course, Reed replied smoothly. I completely understand. The documents are in the conference room next door. You'd only be separated for a few minutes and the door would remain open. But if you're uncomfortable, we can have the files brought here. Jake's parents exchanged glances, having one of those silent conversations that parents somehow managed without words. It's okay, Jake told them. I'm fine talking with Mr. Reed for a few minutes. After another moment of hesitation, they agreed, following Mr. Daniels to the adjacent room, but not before Jake's dad gave Reed a look that clearly said, "We're trusting you." Once they were alone, Reed's formal demeanor relaxed slightly. He stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. I imagine you have questions, he said without turning around. Jake had dozens, but one pushed its way to the front. The sabotage. Who did it? And why? Reed turned, his expression grim. That's what the FBI is trying to determine, but I have my suspicions. He moved back to his seat, sitting closer to Jake this time. Have you heard of Horizon Technologies? Jake shook his head. They're my company's main competitor. Their CEO, Thomas Walsh, has been trying to access our quantum encryption technology for years. Last month, I refused his offer to merge our companies. Reed's voice hardened. 3 days later, my head of security discovered evidence that someone had hacked into our network. You think he tried to kill you because you wouldn't merge with his company? Jake asked, shocked. Business can be ruthless, Reed said simply. But proving it will be difficult. Walsh is powerful, with friends in high places. Jake thought about this for a moment, trying to imagine being so greedy that you'd try to kill someone over business. It seemed impossible, yet here he was talking to a man who had nearly died because of corporate rivalry. What's going to happen now? He asked. To Walsh? If they find proof, he'll go to prison for a very long time. To me? Reed shrugged. I'll be more careful about my security. But what I'm more interested in is what happens to you, Jake. Jake shifted uncomfortably under Reed's intense gaze. What do you mean? Your gift is extraordinary. With training, you could learn to control it, maybe even call upon it when needed. You can teach me to control it? Jake couldn't hide the excitement in his voice. The idea of understanding his strange visions, of not being caught off guard by them, was incredibly appealing. Reed nodded. My foundation has developed techniques that help people like you focus their abilities. Meditation, biofeedback, specific cognitive exercises. We've had remarkable success. So I could, decide when to have visions? Eventually, perhaps. At minimum, you could learn to recognize the signs before a vision occurs, prepare yourself for it, and possibly extend your awareness, see more details, retain more information. Jake tried to imagine what that would be like. Not being blindsided by overwhelming images, but instead welcoming them, understanding them. It sounded amazing. There's something else you should know, Reed continued, his tone becoming more serious. The incident with my plane wasn't made public in its entirety. The FBI asked us to withhold certain details. What details? Jake asked. The sabotage was sophisticated, professional grade, and there was a timing device set to trigger the failure when the plane reached cruising altitude over the ocean, where recovery would be nearly impossible. Reed's eyes locked with Jake's. Without your warning, I would have died. The investigators are certain of it. A chill ran through Jake as the weight of what he'd done, what he'd prevented, really sank in for the first time. The reason I'm telling you this, Reed continued, is so you understand the true value of your gift. It's not just some strange anomaly or psychological quirk. It's a profound ability that can save lives. Before Jake could respond, the door opened and his parents returned with Mr. Daniels. They looked thoughtful but no longer as tense as before. Mr. Reed was just telling me about his foundation, Jake explained, about how they help people who have abilities like mine. His mom sat down beside him, her expression careful. "We've been looking at some of their research papers and case studies. It's impressive work. We'd like to offer Jake the opportunity to work with our specialists," Reed said, addressing his parents directly. "Weekly sessions to help him understand and develop his ability. All expenses paid, of course, and always with your supervision and approval." Jake's dad frowned slightly. "And what do you get out of this arrangement, Mr. Reed?" It was a blunt question, but Reed didn't seem offended. "A fair question. Partially, it's gratitude. Your son saved my life and I want to help him in return. But I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a research component. What we learn from working with Jake could help others with similar gifts. And yes, there may eventually be practical applications, early warning systems for natural disasters, security, consulting, medical diagnostics, but those are distant possibilities." "And if we say no?" Jake's mom asked. "Then you say no," Reed replied simply. "Jake is a minor, and you're his parents. My offer comes with no obligations or strings attached." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card, placing it on the table. "Take some time to think about it. Talk it over as a family. My private number is on the back. Call anytime." Jake stared at the card, his mind racing, with possibilities. Learning to control his visions, to understand them, it was more than he'd ever hoped for. "There's one more thing," Reed said, his tone changing slightly. "The police may have more questions about how you knew about the sabotage. Some of the investigators find your explanation difficult to accept." "You mean they don't believe me?" Jake said flatly. Reed nodded. "Unfortunately, yes. Abilities like yours aren't widely accepted in law enforcement circles. If you'd like, my legal team can help navigate those conversations." "Why would you do all this for us?" Jake's dad asked, still seemingly suspicious of Reed's generosity. Reed was quiet for a moment, looking again at the photograph of his father. 20 years ago, when my father started experiencing his premonitions, people thought he was crazy. Some even accused him of causing the accidents he predicted. He had no one to turn to, no one who understood what was happening to him. He looked up at Jake, his expression sincere. "I don't want Jake to go through that, not when I have the resources to help." For the first time since entering Reed's office, Jake felt a genuine connection to the billionaire sitting across from him. Not because of his wealth or power, but because he really understood what Jake was experiencing. "Can I think about it?" Jake asked. Reed smiled. "Of course. Take all the time you need." He stood, indicating their meeting was coming to an end. "Whatever you decide, Jake, remember this. What you have is a gift, not a burden. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." As Mr. Daniels escorted them back to the elevator, Jake felt lighter somehow, as if a weight he hadn't even realized he was carrying had been lifted from his shoulders. For the first time since the incident at the airport, he wasn't afraid of what was happening to him. He was curious. 6 months had passed since Jake's life-changing meeting with Alexander Reed. The leaves that had been green during that first visit to Reed Tower were now turning, golden and red, drifting down to cover the sidewalks as Jake walked from the bus stop to the Reed Foundation's research center. He no longer needed his parents to accompany him on these weekly visits. After the first month of careful observation, they'd grown comfortable with the Foundation's staff and the work they were doing with Jake. Now he made the journey alone each Saturday morning, his backpack filled with the journal he used to record his experiences and the exercises he practiced daily. The center occupied the entire 5th floor of a medical building near the university. Unlike Reed's flashy corporate headquarters, the Foundation kept a low profile, just a simple plaque beside the elevator that read, "Reed Foundation for Cognitive Research." Jake liked that. It made what happened inside feel more like science, and less like something from a comic book. He waved to Carlos at the reception desk, who buzzed him through the security door. The familiar hallway stretched before him, lined with peaceful landscape paintings and comfortable seating areas. Classical music played softly from hidden speakers, part of the center's carefully designed atmosphere to help participants feel calm and focused. "Morning, Jake," called Dr. Lin as he passed her office. She was the neurologist who had performed his initial brain scans and still monitored his progress. "How's that meditation practice going?" "Better," Jake replied with a smile. "I made it to 15 minutes yesterday without getting distracted." "Excellent. That's real progress." Jake continued to his usual room at the end of the hall, where Nora was waiting. In her late 60s, with silver hair always pulled back in a neat bun, Nora had been working with people like Jake for most of her career. First as a psychology professor, then as the Foundation's head researcher. She never treated him like a kid or a lab rat, which Jake appreciated more than anything. "Right on time," she said, checking her watch as he entered. "Ready to work?" Jake nodded, dropping his backpack and settling into the comfortable chair opposite hers. The room looked more like someone's living room than a laboratory, with soft lighting, plants in the corners, and no visible scientific equipment, though Jake knew cameras and sensors were built into the walls to monitor his brain activity during their sessions. "Any experiences this week?" Nora asked, opening her tablet to take notes. Jake pulled out his journal. "Two small ones. Tuesday after school I got that feeling. You know, the pressure behind my eyes? When I was walking home with my friend Tyler. I stopped and focused like you taught me, and I saw Tyler's bike chain breaking. So I told him to walk his bike instead of riding it." "And did it break?" "Yeah, about a block later. He was pushing it so he didn't fall or anything, just had to carry it home." Nora nodded approvingly. "You controlled the vision without it overwhelming you. That's excellent progress. And the second one?" Jake hesitated, flipping through his journal. "This one was different. I was doing homework Thursday night, and suddenly I knew my mom was going to get a phone call with bad news. But it wasn't like seeing something specific, just a feeling really strong." "Did it happen?" "Yeah. My grandma fell and broke her wrist. Nothing super serious, but Mom had to drive up to help her." Jake looked up from his journal. "It wasn't as clear as usual. Is that normal?" "Every ability manifests differently," Nora explained. "Some people get detailed visual information, others just strong impressions or feelings. Your gift seems to be evolving, becoming more varied in how it presents. That's actually a good sign. It means you're connecting with it on more levels." They spent the next hour practicing exercises designed to help Jake recognize the early signals of an incoming vision and maintain awareness during one. The techniques were a blend of meditation, visualization, and what Nora called cognitive anchoring, using specific mental images to stay grounded when the overwhelming sensory input of a premonition began. "I think you're ready to try something new today," Nora said as their regular session was winding down. "Mr. Reed asked if you'd be comfortable meeting with him to demonstrate your progress." Jake sat up straighter. "He's here? Today?" "In the conference room. But only if you feel ready. There's no pressure." In the 6 months since their first meeting, Jake had only seen Alexander Reed twice, brief visits where the billionaire stopped by to check on the Foundation's work and say hello. Despite funding Jake's training, Reed had kept his distance, letting the professionals handle the day-to-day work. Jake appreciated that he wasn't treated like some kind of sideshow attraction, but he also felt a connection to Reed that went beyond their unusual first encounter. "I'd like to see him," Jake decided. Nora led him to the conference room at the center of the facility. Inside, Reed sat at the head of a long table, reviewing documents on a slim laptop. He looked up when they entered, his face breaking into a genuine smile. "Jake," he said warmly, standing to greet them. "Nora tells me you've been making remarkable progress." "I think so," Jake replied, suddenly feeling shy despite his excitement. "The visions don't scare me anymore. I can sort of work with them now, instead of just having them happen to me." "That's exactly what we hoped for," Reed said, gesturing for Jake to sit. "I'm sorry I haven't been around more often. The sabotage investigation has been complicated." Jake had followed the case in the news. Thomas Walsh, the CEO of Horizon Technologies, had been questioned by the FBI but released due to lack of evidence. The actual saboteur, a former military contractor hired through layers of shell companies, had been arrested but refused to reveal who hired him. "Are you still in danger?" Jake asked. Reed's expression tightened slightly. "My security team thinks so. That's actually part of why I wanted to speak with you today." He glanced at Nora, who nodded encouragingly. "I'll be traveling to Singapore next week for an international technology conference. Given what happened last time..." Jake understood immediately. "You want to know if I sense any danger about your trip?" "Only if you're comfortable trying," Reed clarified. "Nora tells me you've been practicing focusing your awareness, but I don't want to pressure you." Jake considered this. He'd never tried to deliberately look for danger that wasn't already triggering his ability. His visions had always come spontaneously, but over the past months, he'd gotten better at tuning into the subtle signals that preceded them. "I can try," he said finally. "I just don't know if it works that way." Nora brought over a small wooden box from the cabinet. Inside was a smooth black stone attached to a simple cord, a focusing tool they'd been using in recent sessions, just like we've practiced, she instructed, placing the stone in Jake's hand. "Center yourself first, then open your awareness. Don't force anything." Jake closed his eyes, feeling the cool weight of the stone in his palm. He took slow, deep breaths, counting each one until his racing thoughts began to calm. Following the techniques Nora had taught him, he built a mental image of a still pond, then imagined dropping a pebble with Reed's name into its center, watching the ripples spread outward. For several minutes, nothing happened. Jake continued breathing steadily, keeping the image of the pond in his mind. Then, just as he was about to give up, he felt it, the familiar pressure building behind his eyes, the slight ringing in his ears that signaled a vision approaching. Images began flickering through his mind: a tall building with unusual architecture, a hotel room with the curtains drawn, a room full of people in formal attire. Nothing alarming, just glimpses of what he assumed was Reed's upcoming trip. Then the scene shifted. Jake saw a man in a hotel uniform pushing a room service cart down a hallway. The cart's contents seemed to blur and refocus, showing a large suitcase hidden beneath the white tablecloth. The vision zoomed in on the man's hands as he slipped a keycard into a door. There was a strange device attached to the underside of the cart. Jake's eyes snapped open, his heart pounding. "There's something wrong with the room service," he blurted out. Reed and Nora exchanged glances. "What did you see?" Nora asked gently. Jake described the vision as precisely as he could: the hotel hallway, the cart, the hidden suitcase, the device. "Did you see the man's face?" Reed asked, his voice tense. Jake shook his head. "No, just his hands in uniform. But there was a logo on his sleeve, a lion or tiger standing on its back legs, gold on dark blue." Reed's eyebrows shot up. "That's the Meridian Grand in Singapore. Their company symbol is a lion. It's where I'm scheduled to stay." A heavy silence fell over the room as they all absorbed the implications of what Jake had seen. "I'll have my security team change all arrangements immediately," Reed said finally. "Different hotel, different schedule, everything." "Do you think it's Walsh again?" Jake asked. Reed's expression hardened. "Almost certainly, but once again, proving it will be the challenge." Jake felt suddenly tired, the effort of the focused vision leaving him drained but also exhilarated. He'd done it, not just experienced a premonition, but deliberately sought one out. "You did remarkably well," Nora told him, clearly impressed. "That level of control usually takes years to develop." Reed was already on his phone, speaking quietly but intensely to someone about security protocols. When he finished the call, he turned back to Jake with a serious expression. "You've just saved my life." "Again?" Jake shrugged, embarrassed by the praise. "I'm just glad it worked." "More than worked," Reed corrected. "What you just did represents a quantum leap in your abilities." He looked thoughtful for a moment. "Jake, I have a proposal for you, but I'd want to discuss it with your parents as well. Would they be available to meet later today?" That evening, Jake sat with his parents in Reed's private office at the foundation. The last golden rays of sunset streamed through the windows as Reed explained his idea. A special program for Jake at the foundation, combining his regular schoolwork with advanced training. A chance to fully develop his abilities while helping others. We've identified 3 other young people with gifts similar to Jake's, Reed explained. All living with the burden of abilities they don't fully understand. With your permission, we'd like Jake to become part of our first youth program, not just as a participant, but eventually as a peer mentor. Jake's parents looked uncertain but not opposed. Over the months, they'd witnessed the positive changes in their son, his growing confidence, his sense of purpose, the way he'd embraced his once frightening gift. It would still be just the weekend sessions, right? His mom asked. Reed nodded. For now, yes. As Jake gets older, there might be opportunities for summer programs or specialized courses, but his normal education would always come first. What? Do you think, Jake? His dad asked. Jake thought about the past 6 months, the progress he'd made, the control he'd gained. He thought about the other kids out there experiencing what he had, feeling alone and confused by their abilities. I want to do it, he said firmly. Not just for me, but for the others too. Nobody should have to go through this alone. As the meeting concluded and they prepared to leave, Reed drew Jake aside for a moment. There's one more thing, he said quietly, handing Jake a small envelope. I'll be leaving for Singapore tomorrow, a different hotel, different arrangements thanks to your warning. But I'd still like you to be part of the team keeping an eye out for trouble. Jake opened the envelope to find a plane ticket and a passport. His passport, which had been gathering dust in his parents' filing cabinet since a family trip to Canada years ago. You want me to go with you? He asked, stunned. Reed smiled. Consider it a field test of your abilities. Your parents have already approved, assuming you're interested. My security team would ensure your safety at all times, and Nora would accompany you. The idea of traveling across the world, of using his gift in a real-world situation was both terrifying and thrilling. 6 months ago, Jake would have said no immediately. But now, when do we leave?